Fear is a video game we all remember and idolize to this day, with its timeless classic action and super addicting gameplay loop with highly satisfying slow-motion bullet time, intense surprise horror elements, and a surreal vibe overall that has lasted centuries. I'm bringing up Fear because the game I'm covering today is a lot like it. Trepang2 should be praised as the spiritual successor since it contains many similarities to the 2005 title. Trepang2 is what I'd like to think happens when an experienced developer is given solid funding and able to express extreme creativity in the gaming space. This is a game I would have absolutely demolished at the age of 13, staying up until 3 a.m. and slamming sodas until the game is finished. I played the fuck out of this one, and I have lots to say, so let's just get right into it. Before I talk about the story, I need to mention the obvious. This game is very much like Doom with its exceptionally impressive high-octane violent themes. It's not necessarily as gory or gruesome as Doom, but it's all the same in satisfaction. It feels fucking great to play. It only gets better when you learn the mechanics and master them to the best of your ability. The combat is the best part of the overall package that is Trepang2. At any point in time, you can activate something called Focus, which slows the movement around you, allowing you to make more accurate and powerful shots against the Horizon soldiers that stand in your way. Killing enemies will grant you small amounts of focus, but headshots and brutal melee kills are far more rewarding. There's an option to use a cloak for a brief amount of time as well. Hitting E will activate a cloaking device on your suit and you'll be able to perform proper stealth kills on unsuspecting enemies. Or if you're overwhelmed, you can cloak and give yourself a minute or two to breathe, or switch tactics. You're given the ability to foot sweep enemies by sprint sliding into their feet and grabbing them to use as a human shield. Once grabbed, you can either throw them, use them as a grenade, or execute them with a pretty satisfying method. The game introduces various ways of completing your objective and killing the multiple threats you're up against. You play as 106, a clone that was wrongfully imprisoned by the corrupted Horizon Mercenary Company. During the opening mission, you're freed from your shackles and forced to fight back. In some pretty goddamn satisfying gunfights, might I add. Headshots are lethal and delightful, refilling your focus meter by a hefty margin. The graphics of Trepang2 are by far some of the prettiest I've seen in recent years for an FPS. Many maps and locations have a unique style with various levels of detail. At first, I found myself struggling with Trepang2, mostly due to its difficulty. There are some levels that tone down the action and put more focus on horror, which is something I truly was not expecting. There's even a small mention of the backrooms phenomenon that's plagued the internet in storm over the past couple of years, except it's somewhat of a major plot point in the game. Most levels aren't linear and offer some rewards to curious players who are willing to take extra time to gather documents left behind by others, learning bits and pieces of the lore as you gun down Horizon's entire existence. You can reread these files at any time during the game, and although they're vague, it's the thought that they cared enough to include them for brain-rotted simpletons such as myself. You can also find things like weapon upgrades for the guns you'll carry, which allow you to put suppressors, lasers, different firing types, and tons of camos onto them. There are many side missions you can embark on after completing the opening level, fit with intense storyline tidbits and high-octane mini-boss fights with top-notch security officers of the Horizon Corporation. You don't have to complete the side missions if you don't want, but it's worth checking them out for the sake of understanding what's really going on at times, or if you're in the mood for going fucking crazy with guns blazing gameplay. I guess now would be a good time to talk about how amazing the combat feels. Like I said earlier, this has to be the closest thing to a Fear title we've gotten in ages. It plays the same, it looks elegant, and throws the player into some devastating yet satisfying situations. Still, that's not to say the difficulty is something to laugh at by any means. I played through once on normal, but now I'm currently doing a new run on very hard. On any difficulty beneath normal, you're essentially going to get railed by everything the game has to throw at you. Much like Doom, being on the move constantly is a necessity considering how accurate your enemies are. Using a combination of your player skills and special upgrades, you'll actually stand a chance against the army of Horizon soldiers you come across. You can search around the environment of each map and find weapon upgrades like attachments with pros and cons of their own. As you progress, you can unlock new camouflage for your gear, which is a pretty nice touch. There are tons of different colors to pick through as well. The guns in this game are pretty standard. You get an assault rifle, pistols, a shotgun, DMR, SMG, grenade launchers, all with unique attachments available during each mission. Every gun is designed to operate in their respective ways, like the assault rifle, which feels punchy but has the most recoil. My personal favorite is the SMG, modeled after the infamous Chris Vector machine gun. With the right attachments installed and the proper target in your crosshair, it'll almost never disappoint you, especially when putting an extended mag on it. There are a few grenade types to play with, like incendiary, frags, and even throwable knives or axes. The choice of how you approach the next threat is entirely up to you, but I personally liked charging in guns blazing. It's safe to say that this game satiates my hunger for the action genre, force-feeding me great set pieces and intense fights. The storyline is pretty good, though it's not the longest. It took me a total of 7 or so hours to complete it, side quests included. While there are lots of fantastic moments riddled throughout, I first want to mention some highlights that stood out to me personally. There's a lot of impressive destructible environments throughout the game that I don't think I've seen before in any recent titles. I'm not exaggerating. The statues in the museum alone can be broken into individual chunks and all differ from how you hit them. This is just a small example, as many other things like glass, dirt, pieces of rock, mud, and others will fly all over the fucking place when an explosion or a bullet happens to hit it. The destruction is absolutely wild, and it's great. I really enjoyed this segment where you have to raid one of the Horizon bases, going underground to discover some strange experiments going on behind the scenes. Eventually you meet these red goopy guys that remind me of a realistic Super Meat Boy, but they charge after you quickly and explode upon death, dealing splash damage. You're better off keeping your distance and shooting when it's safe to do so. Shortly afterwards, there's a fucking sweet segment where you're being chased by a high-value experiment dubbed the Mothman. This is the scariest part of the game for sure, with his intimidating looks, size, and tactics. When you're just about to escape from the crippling facility, he unexpectedly returns to finish what he started. With the confining fence walls and the limited amount of room available, I gotta say, it's probably my absolute favorite scene in the game, bar none. I can't forget about the amazing soundtrack either. Again, comparing to Doom, this game's sound design and music are both phenomenal. Every fight feels like a John Wick film, only amplified 10 times over with your special abilities and arsenal. It just feels so fucking good to play it. Listen to that fucking music! God damn, it hits my every nerve. I love it. The enemy variety is pretty cool too. You go from fighting various tiers of Horizon soldiers to these neatly dressed cultists who act just as crazy and wild as the rest of the roster, and the infected creatures on specific missions. If you're still feeling a bit hungry for battle, there are combat simulators you can engage with in the main hub of your headquarters. These can be completed on any difficulty of your choosing and likely will put your first-person skills to the ultimate test. There's also a plethora of cheat codes you can unlock after beating the main game for the first time, and depending on your difficulty, you'll unlock crazier or more difficult options through there. If you have a weak stomach, or if you're 5 years old, I guess, you can turn off the high gore level and switch it to confetti mode, so instead of bones and blood, you'll see happy colorful strings instead. Pretty cool feature, even if it's kind of silly. Speaking of silly, I absolutely love the idea of sliding into enemies and sending them into fucking orbit. There are so many different ways to go about kicking ass in this game that it might as well be a scripture. I can see this game being engraved forever in my Steam library as one of the greatest. It has made me laugh and kept me engaged since buying it. I don't really need to comment on them, but the graphics are gorgeous. It's rare for me to consider something so simple in my reviews because I'm always quoted as saying good graphics don't make a good game, a statement I still attest by today. But this game looks great from the brightest corners to the darkest. I have no doubt in my mind that the developers know how to make the Unreal Engine stand out and look great. Honestly, it's such an iconic game, and revisiting it after I've played through the main game feels so much more satisfying. I've been trying to go through it on hard difficulty just for the thrill of it, and I'm really happy I finally got the chance to experience it. The story threw me a curveball the entire time, and if you're planning on playing it anytime soon, I highly recommend you stop watching here. We're entering spoiler territory. It turns out that 106, the character you're playing as, is merely a pawn to a bigger game. After destroying Horizon and quite literally murdering the CEO of the company, everything appears to be going well, until the director of the syndicate essentially shuts you down. Just for even more shock, you discover that you've been killing your own clones this whole time. Different versions of 106 failed experiments that gained sentience and branched away from Syndicate, far too powerful to be stopped by their army. Instead, 106 was brought upon to simply kill his brothers, as hinted by the patriarch at Jorgen Castle. That also means the Mothman, 107, and the ninja character from the beginning were all just previous versions of yourself that were killed. Holy shit. What a mindfuck. Unfortunately, this might as well be where I take a quick dive into what I'm not a huge fan of when it comes to Trepang2. Hey, look, if God is real, then make no mistake, Trepang2 is the pinnacle of modern day action gaming, but everybody knows that God gives his toughest battles to his mightiest soldiers. But in those battles, mistakes can be made. Or some shit. Trepang2's length isn't the only thing that bummed me out. There's also a home base that the player is given after the introduction mission as a hub. Here is where you'll spend time upgrading your stuff and preparing your gear for the next intense combat encounter. You can also head into the briefing room and personally select which mission you'd like to embark on. But besides that and a small training range, the hub is kind of fucking pointless, especially considering the endgame. I'll get to that in a bit, don't worry. There's nobody to talk to really, because all of the NPCs in your base don't do anything aside from stand and idle animations. They talk to you briefly before or after each mission, but in my opinion it feels super forced. I don't really feel connected to any of these guys, nor the director of the company you work for, but it's mainly because of its great plot. It's kind of like when Shepard betrays Ghost and Roach in the original Modern Warfare 2, only less dramatic. So as you can expect, Syndicate turns out to be a vessel for illegal activities that you yourself are responsible for. The blood of Horizon is on your hands, which makes you an uncontrollable asset. You have to kill every single one of the motherfuckers that bonded with you at an earlier point. All of the fellow soldiers who fought alongside you this whole time are now against you. Don't get me wrong, the segments when you're going up against Syndicate are very good, but I kind of saw it coming since the beginning. We were never really meant to trust these people. That's not to say there aren't still fantastic moments. Much like Ethan in Resident Evil 7, 106 gets his hand cut off at the endgame, making each and every fight all the more intense and removing your dual-wielding abilities. Then you're forced to go up against the ultimate life form, your clone, the next cycle of life, a super soldier named 107.
Initiating cycle 107.
And boy, he's a tough son of a fuck. He has the same exact tech, gadgetry, and mindset as you do. Consider him the guy you're not supposed to worry about after he fucked your girlfriend twice and bragged about it on social media. Okay, that's a bit harsh. Anyway, his boss fight is really annoying, but in a good way. Getting used to his tactical switches and cloaking abilities will get easier through trial and error. Once he's dead, 106 triggers the internal nuclear bomb from the basement of the hub. Even though it's a great fight between two unstoppable forces, it feels rather short in comparison to other segments of the game. I was expecting this fight to last for a good amount of time, but it really doesn't. It felt rushed, as if the devs ran out of time before coming up with its rather anticlimactic conclusion. I'm not normally much of a complainer when it comes to unlockable cheats, but I'm a little confused as to why some of the players' camouflage is locked off behind insanely ridiculous challenges. Most of them require you to beat the entire game on the hardest difficulty, which is a fucking nightmare. I've already told you how difficult the game can feel on very hard, let alone on extreme. That's a challenge I personally don't want to beat. There's some more minor things I want to talk about, like the weird cloaking mechanic. It drains way too fast, and there's no possible way of upgrading it further. If you activate it by accident, like I often do, canceling it will force a recharge entirely. I suppose it might have been a bit too easy to stealth your way through the entire game if you had more of it. Through all of this, it's very useful when you do have it. I'm also a little disappointed that you don't encounter more fucked up abominations like the Mothman or the Flesh Golem. It felt like a nice balance between horror and action for a few missions, but eventually it fades back into the slamming ham formula. I would have really loved more hands-on experiences with the horror inside this world. Personally, the entire backrooms segment had me on the edge of my seat. I thought I was gonna fight and kill all sorts of disgusting monsters from other dimensions, or perhaps some rejected Horizon experiments gone wrong. Unfortunately, that doesn't happen. It starts off strong with an enemy that jump scares you to death, forcing you to have to stay low and quiet if you want to proceed further. You'd think that this would be important, right? No. Instead, we're given a lame segment where you fend off a few waves of guards, flip some switches, then destroy the giant crystal in the center of the room with one shot. You're telling me I went through all this trouble just to find a fucking glowing rock? That's a pretty dumb concept. Oh, fuck you, that game is totally different. I also wasn't a mega fan of the side quests, at least not all of them. Majority of the oddball missions in this game are for you to get better affiliated with the controls and master the art of dodging your enemies. But the objectives are kinda lame. Stand in one area, defend a specific thing, fight bad guys, repeat. It's not the worst thing in the world, and I'd love to think the combat makes up for it. I promise you'll be shooting way more than you won't be. But for some of the side missions, they really do go hard in terms of combat. Always expect the unexpected. Break some legs and skulls and fire an unholy amount of hellish rain upon your enemies. It's a sweet ride regardless of the seat you take, as there are plenty to choose from. Trepang2 is the greatest game I have played this year. It was totally worth the $15 I paid on G2A, while its base price is set to $30. I really can't recommend it enough. It's got everything you've been wanting in a shooter. A gripping, if not somewhat predictable storyline, intense out-of-this-world graphics and gunplay, just tons of shit that I had to let loose. It's a fucking masterpiece of a game, flaws and all. It even has controller support for those late nights of nostalgic gaming vibes with very responsive and customizable options for whatever controller you choose. I can only hope that someday we might see a Trepang 3 or some sort of delicious DLC full of new missions and great new unlockables. I'm aware that the Blade Kisser DLC is available, but I haven't checked it out yet. You guys should definitely try Trepang2 though, as it serves to be a colossal giant in the library of Steam gems. I'm sad I didn't discover it sooner, or at least play it a lot earlier. Now, I've got to try and break my own cycle here at home. That cycle being, I need to stop sitting here rambling. The fucking dishes need to be done. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you guys next time.